Hello and welcome to it. You're watching #Africa. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be taking a comprehensive look at stories that dominated headlines around the continent. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was in Mauritania this week. He wants to ramp up his country's growing influence in Africa. Turkish companies are already involved in energy and construction projects on the continent. Erdogan will also be visiting Senegal and Mali. Last December, he visited Sudan, Chad and Tunisia. Malawi has launched a new typhoid vaccine campaign targeting about 24,000 children in the country's second largest city of Blantyre. The vaccine will be administered in high-risk areas and tested over a 6-month period. Typhoid is a highly contagious infectious disease that spreads through contaminated food or drink. And tram commuters are now being treated to a luxurious ride in the Egyptian city of Alexandria after the historic public service underwent renovations. The new carriages offer modern services to compete with increasing transport prices and traffic jams in the city. The tramway system, which has been operating since 1860, is the oldest in Africa and has become an iconic landmark in the city. Right, this week we explore the contentious issue of the death penalty on the continent. Botswana recently hanged a man who murdered his girlfriend and son. It's the first execution in 2 years by the only Southern African nation that has not abolished the death penalty. Here to help us unpack these trends on the continent, I'm joined by Amnesty International researcher Serena Macadam. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to start with this. By its very nature, this form of punishment is meant to deter people from committing certain crimes. Is there research to suggest that indeed it is working?
I would like to start by saying that Amnesty International believes that this recent execution in Botswana is a regression on the part of the Botswana government because it's actually the first state in Southern Africa to implement an execution in 2018. And we also find that other countries are moving away from the use of the death penalty as a form of punishment. For example, countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe and Swaziland have not implemented any execution in recent years. In fact, Lesotho, the last time Lesotho executed someone was more than 2 decades ago in 1995. So what we're seeing really is a shift away from the use of the death penalty as a form of punishment. And Amnesty International really believes that there's no place for the death penalty in the modern era. And we really call on the Botswana authorities to establish a moratorium on the death penalty with a view of abolishing the death penalty with immediate effect.
And this shift away from the death penalties in the other countries that you mentioned, why is that? Are they seeing that perhaps it's not the way to go?
I think you rightly pointed out that there is this perception that the death penalty can deter crime in countries, and it's a popular perception. However, empirical studies have shown that there's actually no link between a crime being committed and the death penalty. So if someone is about to commit a crime and they know that they may face the death penalty, it's actually completely irrelevant. We also found, according to empirical studies, that countries that have abolished the death penalty don't see an increase in crime. So it's a complete myth that having the death penalty in a country is a deterrent for crime.
It sort of begs the question, why then do some of these African countries who still maintain the death penalty do so?
I think it has a lot to do with politicians and how they are seen in public. Politicians often want to be seen as doing something and taking action against people who have committed a crime. But what Amnesty International has found is that the use of the death penalty is actually a violation of the right to life. And all people, by virtue of being human, have a right to life. And what we would rather encourage countries to do is to invest in proper and effective policing systems and fair and functional criminal justice systems. So human rights law demands that people who are found guilty for committing crimes need to be brought to justice, but they need to be brought to justice in fair trials without resorting to the death penalty.
Then comes the argument that you find that there are some hardened criminals who commit the most heinous crimes, and some people would argue that then the death penalty should be meted out against those people. How do you respond to that?
Amnesty International is opposed to the use of the death penalty in all circumstances, regardless of the nature of the crime, like you're saying, regardless of the characteristics of the offender, or the means used by the state to carry out the execution. So even in cases of the most heinous crimes, like you're referring to, we are still opposed to the death penalty. But the opposition to the death penalty doesn't mean that we are calling for immunity or impunity for criminals. What we believe is that the system of executions doesn't serve justice. Justice instead is served by systems that are effective, fair, and accountable in trying to prevent and trying to deter crime.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. And that was Amnesty International researcher for Southern Africa, Serena Macadam. Do stay with us, because after the break, large discoveries of oil are causing political arguments in Kenya. Hello again. Residents of Kenya's poorest region want the country's massive oil profits shared with their community. They say this will make up for decades of neglect. Local leaders say at least a third of oil revenues must be injected into development projects, but the row now threatens to delay oil production in the region.
London-listed company Tullow Oil found crude oil here 6 years ago. It's funded a hospital, school, dormitories and paid for scholarships to generate goodwill. But residents of Turkana say the area remains largely underdeveloped. They're now demanding that government share at least a third of the country's oil revenues with them. Government officials argue that Turkana's rural economy cannot absorb a wave of cash.
Kwamba tumepunguza umaskini, nani hajaona bado maji haijatosha, nani hajaona bado chakula haijatosha, bado mahospitali haijatosha, bado watoto wetu hawajaenda shule, bado watu wanalala njaa.
The Kenyan government wants to keep 80% of its oil revenues. The regional government's share is limited to 15%, while only 5% is allocated to local communities. But Turkana residents say they have little faith in the government after a series of corruption scandals. Now Tullow is concerned that its investment is in jeopardy.
I think that our project timelines are very clear, that we have a financial investment decision by the end of 2018, and then we move towards the development after that. It's important to have the legislative framework in time for the final investment decision at the end of 2019.
A Kenyan Petroleum Ministry official says they are asking established oil producers like Nigeria and Oman for advice on revenue sharing. In Nigeria, 13% of oil revenue goes to local communities, though that has not stopped a tax on oil installations by those wanting more.
The African continent accounts for about 5% of the global tourism market share. Tourism authorities from across the continent gathered under the same roof this week to find ways of growing the sector. For 3 days, the Sandton Convention Center was a melting pot of culture, heritage and business networking from within the continent and beyond. Africa is home to many UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and this annual gathering has again offered visitors and investors the perfect platform to meet each other as business tourism becomes increasingly important.
We are all maturing as an economies of the continent away from extractive natural resources, more towards the service industry, right, which is much more sustainable and much more labor intensive from that side. So I think this is part of the efforts in making sure that we crowd everyone in from the continent and make sure that they become our trading partners as well, but also collaborative in the sense that this is Africa's turn in terms of showcasing to the world. Important here, we don't want to, mimic or copy what the other parts of the world are doing.
There are, however, some challenges.
The gap of infrastructure is huge. This is why UATP used to sit at African Union Commission Dialogue Group to discuss about how to improve public transport.
In spite of these challenges, authorities believe the possibilities are endless.
This event, which is in the main about the continent and making sure that our people are able to network amongst themselves, do business amongst each other as part of contributing towards intra-Africa trade, because as we know, it's sitting at less than 15%, and we certainly want to see it growing significantly.
For exhibitors, Meetings Africa is a platform for African entrepreneurs to cross-pollinate and for the world to be updated on what's new.
Lava kuri vanhu va tiva ku ri Machangana va vhenda I vahi ene vana va hina lava kulaka sweswi hi lava ku va swi tiva ku ri ntumbuluko wa hina kusukela loko hi ri vantsanana a hi endla yini ku va se va swi rivala a ni ri thekinoloji yi kulukumba wa vona.
Africa dances to the beat of her own drum and sounds the call that indeed she is ready for business. Duduzile Ramela, Johannesburg. A look now at what's been trending on social media this week. A group of graduates from the Africa Digital Media Institute in Nairobi will be crossing their fingers as the Oscar winners are announced this weekend. They are part of the team behind the Oscar-nominated film Watu Wote. The short live-action movie tells the story of a terror attack in a Kenyan bus where Muslim passengers protected Christians. At least 7 people died in northwest Nigeria, reportedly over a religious conversion. A Christian girl converted to Islam in Kaduna State, allegedly leading to violence by Christian youths in the area. At least 15 people were injured and several homes torched. And many Johannesburg motorists were stuck for hours in traffic earlier this week. The backlog was caused by a Boeing 737 being pulled through the streets. It was being moved from Jet Park to Fourways Mall, where the Kidzania theme park is. And finally, a missing Nigerian masterpiece has been sold for almost 20 million rand at auction. The portrait of a Nigerian princess lost for more than 40 years was found in a small London flat. Tutu, by Nigeria's best-known modern artist Ben Enwonu, was painted in 1974. It appeared at an art show in Lagos the following year, but vanished after that. It's the portrait of Adetutu Ademiluyi, granddaughter of a revered traditional ruler of the Yoruba ethnic group. The group was mostly on the anti-government side of the secessionist Biafran War.
It said painted just after the end of the Nigerian Biafran conflict. She does symbol this moment of reconciliation and hope for the nation. I think the fact that she is also the most famous portrait by the nation's most famous artist is also incredibly significant, and the fact that she's been lost for all these years and finally discovered is truly an amazing thing.
And that's it from us for now. Do stay tuned to ENCA for all the latest news. Take care. Bye-bye.